So we're now on Daf Tzadi Amid Beis, and we got up to the two dots on the top line. Now we go back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Nasa es harishona, and here is the case where we had that head-on collision between Yerusha of a chov, meaning where the Yarshim are simply collecting a chov that was owed to the Morish, in this case to the mother, the Shnia, as opposed to the Takana of Ksubas Bonim Dichrin, which is the Yerusha of the Yarshim of the first wife. So he married the first wife and she died. He then inherits his wife. There's no longer a Chiv Ksuba. There's only a Takana Bonim Dichrin. Now he marries the second wife and he dies. The Yarshim of the Shnia will collect the Ksuba. Shmamina Twas. The Gemara wants to derive three dinim by analyzing carefully the Mishnah. The first din that we want to prove from the Mishnah, in the case of a man who marries two wives, and the first one dies during his lifetime, the second dies after he dies, then what we want to do is we want to know whether or not this takana of ksubas banim dichrin exists in theory. If, let's say, there's enough in the nechasim to supply and fulfill the takana of ksubas banim dichrin. Shmamina achas b'chayav v'achas b'moso yesh lam ksubas banim dichrin. In other words, if there's enough money in the pot, in the estate, then for sure we're going to allow for the kiyum, for the fulfillment of ksubas banim dichrin. So again, even though the Yorshei Ashniya are collecting midin chov, namely an outstanding loan that the Morish, the late father, owed to their mother, but nevertheless, and in contrast, the Bnei Ish Harishona are collecting not a chov, but rather Yerusha midin banim dichrin, ksubas banim dichrin. Nevertheless, there's enough money to go around for everyone, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to set up 200 zuz of property for the banim dichrin of the first wife, and 200 zuz for the ksuba payment of the chov of the father for the second wife, the yorshim of the second wife. And this is a big chiddush. Later on, the Gemara is going to try to reject this and fight this. Why? The counter logic to this is that in such a case where the yorshim of the Shishniya who are battling to collect ksuba, and there are Yarshim of the Isha Rishona who are battling in favor of Ksubas Banim Dichrin, in such a case, there is no takana. The Rabbanan waived the takana of Ksubas Banim Dichrin. Why? Because of what's called ktata, or in the language of the Aramaic Talmudic language, in suye. What is the ktata that we're involved in? The Bnei Shnia are going to say to the Bnei Rishona, we're not willing and agreeable to your rights to collect subas bonim different. Ain't on a maskimu. We're not going to agree to that because you're coming to collect the Yerusha. And you want to inherit monies from our father, and as a result, you're going to get more money than we will. Why? Because what's going to happen is that the balance of the estate after the Ksubas Banim Dichrin is paid up is going to be divided equally. You follow? Because again, the Yorshei Ha'em are collecting a chov. After that chov is paid up, now we divvy up the Yerusha. And the Banim Dichrin are going to collect their ksuba of their mother. So it turns out like that. Listen carefully. I'm talking to myself. There are two elements of Yerusha here and one element of a chov. Let's forget about the element of a chov for a moment. Let's put that on the back burners. Let's get to Dina Yerusha. What's going to happen is that the Banim Dichrin are Yarshim, and from the Yerusha, they're going to get 200 zuz up front. Now the balance is going to be divided equally, so that the Banim Dichrin of the Bnei Arishona will get much more from the Yerusha than the Bnei Ashniya. Again, it doesn't really translate into dollars and cents, because the chov that's owed to the Bnei Ashniya is equal to the Yerusha Banim Dichrin. So at the end of the day, they're gonna even it out. But in terms of Yerusha, the Banim Dichrin of the Bnei Arishona are getting a greater Yerusha than the Bnei Ashniya, and that's going to create V'lo Chayshina L'Intsuya. That would create Intsuya Tata. And maybe in such a case, we should waive the entire takana of Ksubas Banim Dichrin, which is going to be a position that we'll have later on in the Gemara. So Gemara says, Mimai, where did you see this in the Mishnah? And Kodman means that since there's not enough money in the estate, therefore the Yerusha goes to the Shniya because that's a Chov, and it's not enough to pay up the two ksubas, so they pay up only one ksuba, namely the chov to the shniya. The first one doesn't have a claim to a chov of ksuba because she died during the lifetime of her husband. And we've been victim who the kadmi, but ha'ika, if there were more funds available in the estate, then shakli, then we would be very happy to give the ksubas banim dichrin, pay that up from the estate to the Yorshei Ha'isha Rishona, pay up the chov of the ksuba to the Isha, Yorshei Ha'isha Shniya, and then the rest will divide up in Yerusha. So the Gemara is building its whole argument and deriving its conclusion based on the dik of the Lashon of Makadimim of Kodin. Now we go on to a second of three Shmaminas. We know that Ksubas Banim Dichrin only applies when there's a Mosar Dina. You remember this? This we had back on Daf. I don't remember which Daf right now, but in any event, we earlier, right? So the Gemara says now, Shmamina, Ksuba Nases Mosul Lechavrita. The monies of Ksuba, which are being collected now by the Yorshei Shniya, that's Masayim, Mana Masayim Zuz, they themselves can serve as Mosar Dina to allow the Ksubas Banim Dichrin to be collected, because if there's no Mosar Dina, then we won't be able to fulfill the Din Yerusha Doraisa with a minimum of 1 dinar. Nimaya, where do I see this in the Mishnah? Now we go to the Sefer of the Mishnah. And the Sefer of the Mishnah establishes that the Yorshei Shniya, Kodmin, the Yorshei Rishona. Now, again, if there's enough money to pay both ksubas, then, as we said earlier, the Banim Dichrin will collect. So what's this din of Kedima? Apparently, we're talking about a case where there's not enough funds in the estate. Now, if that be the case, then the Mishnah should have written this din with a stipulation that there's got to be a Mosar Dina, with which will be Makayim the din of Yerushalayim and Torah. If the Mishnah did not add the following stipulation in Yesh Shom Mosar Dinar, which means that although the Yorshe Shniya code min Yorshe Rishonim, but if there's enough funds for both ksubas, then Enoch Hinami will divide up and collect the ksuba for the Yorshe Shniya and the ksubas banim different for the Yorshe Rishona, but add the stipulation of Yesham Mosar Dina. Why did the Mishnah omit that? That's a very important point. It must be that we don't even need a Mosar Dina. All we need is 200 zuz plus 200 zuz, 400 zuz total, and that's enough. The Mishnah didn't stipulate a Mosar Dina. So it must be that the collection of the ksuba on the part of the Yorshe Shniya is money that's called Mosar Dina. So that money serves a double function. On the one hand, it's a ksuba that was earmarked as a chov to pay the isha, or in hadet hayoshim, and at the same time, it becomes a Mosar Dina. Now we get to the third conclusion that we want to derive from our Mishnah. And this is based on how do we understand Ksubas Banim different, because back on Daf Nun Hey we had two opinions. And it all depends upon Darshinan Lashon Aksuba. According to one opinion, and that's the Amoron from Pumbedisa, their girsa in the ksuba was inun, meaning the banim dichrin yarsun kesef ksubasam, which makes it into Yerusha, which we're very happy about in our context. But there are Amoron from Mata Machasya, their girsa was inun yasvin kesef ksubasam, which means that the banim dichrin, it's not a Yerusha, but Yasmin means notliv, which means it's a chov. And if there's a chov, then we don't understand our Mishnah. Why do we pay up the Yorshe Ashniya before the Yorshe Harishona? It's one chov against the other, and the earlier chov was to the Yorshe Harishona. And Shma Mina, Ksubas Banim Dichrin Lo Tarfim Mishabde, and the halachic implications of the third derivation are very broad, because it means that for Ksubas Banim Dichrin, we cannot collect from Lekuchos. In other words, if monies if possessions and properties and real estate was sold by the father in his lifetime, they can't collect for the Lekuchos. Why? Because they're Yoshim, and the Yoresh can't collect from Lekuchos. And if you would argue that you can be toref ksubas banim different from the lekuchos, like any other chov, then let the bnei rishona come along and to collect their ksubas banim different, which is a chov that predated the chov to the isha shniya, let them collect from the lekuchos if the karka was sold. Now Rav Ashi comes along to reject the two first dinim that we tried to derive. Masechet Rav Ashi Mimai, how do you know to derive this that because of this insuye business, that we want to avoid all this tata, the Rabbanan completely waived ksubas banim different. And my kodmin ayu medayik from the lashon kodmin linachla k'tani. In other words, before we divide up the Yerusha, Shava b'Shava, we make sure that the Yorshe Shniya will collect the Ksuba first, because before you divvy up Yerusha, you pay up the outstanding loans, the debts, the chovos, and the balance they'll divide equally. So V'chi Tema, now you'll ask Yorshe Harishona Lamali. Now, why does the Mishnah say that these are Yorshe Harishona? It should have said B'nei Harishona. Meaning, there are no monies going to the Rishona midin imam. It's not because of their mother that they are collecting these monies. They're collecting them from their father. So that's called Bnei Rishon, Yorshei Rishon. No, I'm sorry. Yorshei Rishon means of the Isha Rishon. So let's go over this Dechia of Rav Ashi. Masechet Rav Ashi, Mimai. How do you prove anything from our Mishnah? Dilma li olameinu l'cha achas v'chai v'achas moso ein lehem ksubas bonim different. Right, and because of Ketuvot that we discussed in great length earlier, therefore they undermined and completely invalidated the entire enterprise of bonim different in this particular scenario. And if you're going to say, therefore, that only the Bnei Shnia collect the ksuba, and the Yorshei Rishona will not collect any ksuba, even if there would be enough funds in the estate to supply two ksubas, that was the word I needed, supply, then you can ask me my kodman. So what does mean kodman? Kodman implies that there is ksubas bonim different, just so we give kedima to the Bnei Ashniya. So the answer is kodman lenachla katani. We're going to reinterpret the word kodman, and it means that as far as the Yerusha is concerned, is we'll divide the Yerusha evenly, square, shava b'shava. But makdimim, before we divide up the Yerusha, first we have to collect the chov, which is the ksuba of the mother of the Yorshei Shniya. So now you'll ask me, v'chitema, if that be the case, that the Yorshei Rishona did not collect the ksubas bonim dichrin, so there's no way that you can justify that they are the Yarshim of the Rishona. In other words, they have rights to the Yerusha of their father, but not to the Rishona because there's no Ksubas Bonim Dichrin. And the answer is the Tani Shnia, the Yarshea is Tananami Li Yarshei HaRishona. That once the Tana mentions the Shnia and her Yarshim, because again, she's collecting the chov of the ksuba that's owed to, they are collecting the chov of the ksuba that's owed to their mother, their late mother. So when they collect that ksuba, that's called shniya v'yorsheh. Again, and why is that Yerusha from their mother? Because there was a chov of a ksuba owed to their mother, and they're collecting that chov. Is therefore the Mishnah uses the language Yorshei Rishona instead of Bnei Rishona. And now Rav Ashi continues and rejects the second din, as far as whether or not the ksuba collected by the Yorshei Shniya is and functions as Mosar Dina. That the collection of the ksuba on the part of the Yorshei Shniya is also functioning as Mosa ksuba. I can take the opposite approach. Ein ksuba naseis Mosa lechaverta. The hacha hu deika Mosa dinar, but the case itself in the Mishnah is where there actually is, in addition to the nichsei shtei ksubos, there's another shavet dinar in the estate. So therefore, both the Bnei Shniya and the Bnei Rishona will collect the value of the two ksubas, and they still have a dinar left over in the estate to divide and fulfill the din d'oraisa of Mosar. You'll ask me, so why didn't the Mishnah add that very important critical stipulation that there is Mosar dinar? And the answer is because that din is going to appear in the next Mishnah, and there's no need to repeat it here. The Gemara explains, The achas b'chai v'achas b'moso tanoi. And the issue of whether or not there is a takana of b'nei of ksubas banim dichrin in a case where one wife died during the lifetime of the father, and the other one died after the husband died. That's a machlokas tanoim. The sanya, that's going to be a machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Akiva. So now we have the Tanakama. Mesu, his wives died. Achas b'chayv, one died before he died. The achas b'moso, after he died. Oh, the Tanakama is Benanas. Benanas Omer Yecholim Bnei Arishona Lomar Livnei Ashniya Bnei Balas Chovatem Tluk Subas Imchem Utsa'u. In other words, you're right. You're right, meaning this is the voice of the Bnei Rishona talking to the Bnei Ashniya. You're right. You deserve to collect the chov of the ksuba. Okay, that's called Bnei Balas Chov. But now, Tluch Ksubas Imchem, collect that chov, Utsa'u. So Umea Yerusha. Oh, I see. The Gemara, or shall I say the view of Benanas, is predicated on the assumption before that the collection of the ksuba on the part of the Bnei Ashniya is itself a kiyum of Yerusha. As we said before, it therefore supplies the condition of Mosar Dina. So if that be the case, the Rishona will say to the Shniya, hey, you know what? You collected that chov. That chov is also your part of the Yerusha. Now get out of here. You no longer have rights to the Yerusha. We're going to collect the ksubas banim dichron of the Yerusha of our mother with the, right, from the estate. Rabbi Kiva Omer, Kfar kofza nachla milifnei bnei harishona v'nafel lifnei bnei hashniya. From the moment that the father died, the husband died during the lifetime of the second wife, kofza nachla. He writes here that the word kofza means histalka. Milifnei bnei harishona v'nafel lifnei bnei hashniya. Which basically means the following, that the Bnei Ashniya now have a right to collect the chov of the ksuba to their mother. And now, once the chov is collected, then the balance of the estate is now given to Yerusha. And both the Yarshe Harishona and the Yarshe Ashniya will divide up the balance of the estate equally. Not the way Benanas had it, that the collection of the ksuba on the part of the Bnei Ashniya is their Yerusha, and therefore they're out of the Yerusha. No. They collect that ksuba, says Rabbi Akiva, as a chov, and now we're ready to divide up the balance of the properties. Midin Yerusha, Chalukas Yerusha, it'll be Shava b'Shava. My lava haka miflagi. The Mar Sover, according to Benanas, Akas B'Chayv mostly Yeshlam Ksubas Bonim Dichrin. We're not going to be choshesh for this Tata business. The institution of Ksubas Bonim Dichrin will apply even in this case. And therefore, the Bnei Arishon have a right to say to the Bnei Ashniya, take your Ksuba, your mother's Ksuba, and that's what you get from the Yerusha. The balance of the Yerusha goes to us. Umar Sover, Rabbi Kiva holds Akas B'Chayv mostly Elam Ksubas Bonim Dichrin. Because of the Chash of Ketuvot, the Rabbanan completely undermined and negated the takana of ksubas banim dichrit, and the bnei shnia collected ksubas iman, and the rest of the nechasim are yerusha to be divided equally. But now Rabbah is going to offer an alternative interpretation of the machlokas between Ben Nanas and Rabbi Akiva. Omar Rabbah, Ashkechas Sinu l'Rabbana debei Rav the Asvi Kamri. I found the Talmidim in the Beis Medrash that were offering an alternative interpretation of this machlokas Ben Nanas and Rabbi Akiva. The Kuli Alma. Both Ben Nanas and Rabbi Akiva hold achas b'chayv supposed to yeshlam ksubas banim dichrin. Even Rabbi Akiva agrees that the institution of banas dichrin was not undermined in this case because of the chashash k'tot. He's not worried about chashash k'tot of a hacha. Here we're talking about a machlokas about whether the ksuba could serve a double function and could also be a mosar dinar. There's no mosar dinar. And the machlokas between Ben Nanas and Rabbi Akiva is whether or not the ksuba that's not going to be collected as a chov on the part of the bnei hashnia naseis mosar l'chaverta or lo naseis mosar l'chaverta. And v'uadin l'bal chov, and the same thing would apply in the case of any bal chov, whether or not that payment to the bal chov from the Yerusha could also serve as a fulfillment of Chalukas Yerusha committed. So let's say, for example, the father borrowed money during his lifetime, and he was married to two wives, and they would die during his lifetime. So he inherits his wives, then he dies, and he leaves the Yerusha, which is equivalent to two ksubos for banim dichrin. There are other nechasim that are still left in the party to pay up the malva. So the machlokes is going to be now the following: the nechasim that are mishubadim to the chov, and that could be in the case of ksuba, in the case of halva, can they be considered mosar to fulfill the din Yerusha doraisa? And now we can be Mekayim the Takonis Ksubas Banim Dichrin. Marsa, we're going to Ben Nanas, Ksuba Naseis Mosar. Vehu Adin Lebal Chov. That shibud for the Ksuba is considered Mosar to fulfill the din of Yerusha Dorais. There's no din for another, no requirement or need for another Mosar. And the same thing applies not just to ksuba to any bal chov. Umar so Rabbi Akiva holds ein ksuba nasis mosel chavata v'udin lebal chov. So Rava is now going to reject this interpretation of the Rabbanan Debei Rav. V'amina lehu ano, Rav says that I responded to the Rabbanan of Debei Rav. The machlokas tanoim between Ben Nanas and Rabbi Akiva is not the way you interpreted it, but rather b'bal chov kuli amalo pli davi mosa. When a bal chov, an outstanding debt that was owed to a malva, and the malva now comes to collect the chov from the Yerusha, and the two wives are demanding ksubas banim dichrin, is everybody agrees that chov that's collected by the malva serves as mosar. He writes here in the note that Kevon Shashtar Yotze al Kulam, Sharikila Yarshu Kulam Esmos Hachov Yachach Porin also Biad Hachov Nimtzit Shemos Elus Kaima Yerusha Do writes. So Rashi is going to explain here that originally the most of that chov were inherited by the Yarshim, and then from that Yerusha they pay up the chov. So therefore, the most that were initially inherited, that's a kiyum of Yerusha Doraisa. That's in the case of a bal chov. Ki pligi b'ksuba. But the machlokus is only with regard to ksuba, which is being paid up as a chov. to the Bnei Ashniya. So again, we're talking about Achas B'Chai Achas B'Moso. The Bnei Rishona are claiming Ksubas Barim Dik. The Bnei Ashniya are claiming the Chov of the Ksuba. And here's the machlokus between Ben Anas and Rabbi Akiva. Would the Ksuba of the Shniya become Mosa? Ben Anas holds that just like in the case of Balchov, there's a Shiva to pay the Ksuba, and that Ksuba is being collected from the Yerusha, therefore it has a din of Mosa. Rabbi Akiva holds no. In the case of a Chov to a Malveh, that Chov and its payment qualifies and is defined as Mosa. But Tashlum Ksuba, in this case to the Bnei Hashniya, cannot be considered Mosa. And again, Rashi explains, Kevan shebnei Hashniya toanim shalem lo chal mitzvahs priyas balchov me'achar shem tovim shem atovim nifroim shalachov nimtza shel gabeim lo chal kan din Yerusha me'atov. I don't get it. Try it one more time. Kevan shebnei Hashniya toanim shalem lo chal mitzvahs priyas balchov. Right, because they can't be chayav in the mitzvah priyas balchov when they're claiming a chov. They want to claim that the father owed their mother a chov, and now when he dies, they're collecting the chov vis-a-vis their mother from the Yerusha of the father. So therefore, you can't say that there's a din of Yerusha here where they're claiming that they are collecting a chov. And if they're collecting a chov, that's not called Yerusha. It comes back to that discussion that we had before, that chov and Yerusha are two separate entities. So we're going to have to say that in this case, according to Rabbi Akiva, there cannot be a takana of ksubas barim dichrin, and the Bnei Rishona therefore would not collect the ksuba because there's no mosar dina and no kiyum of Yerusha dorais. Maskif law Rav Yosef hachi. If the machlokas here is the way Rav interpreted it, then why Rabbi Akiva Omer kvar kofza nachla im yesh mosar dinar miboile? Well, what does it mean kvar kofza nachla? Right, that there's no takana of ksubas barim different. That's not really true according to Rav. It really depends upon whether there's mosar dinar or there's not mosar dinar. He should have said im yesh mosar dinar miboile. That's what he should have said. That if there's amongst the estate of the father is mosar dinar, then the Bnei Rishona could also collect ksubas barim different. He made a flat, absolute, unconditional statement that the barim different are out in the code. Eloma Rav Yosef, the Machlokes is in the case of Achas B'Chayav, Achas B'Moso, is there Ksubas Barim Dichrin or not? You know, are we Choshesh for Ketuvot? Bahani Tanoi, Ki Hani Tanoi. And this Machlokes between Ben Anas and Rabbi Akiva is really an old Machlokes between Rabbi Shimon and Tanakama, brought down in the Brisa Desanya, Nasa es harishona umeisa, Nasa es hashniya umeis hu. Boyen boner shel zu liachar misa v'not l'ksubas iman. Right, the shniya collects, the bonim of the shniya collects the ksuba, that's a chov, that's outstanding debt to their mother. The Bnei Rishona, according to the Tanakama, do not collect ksubas barim dichrin, even if there would be mosar dinar. Rav Shimon Omer, if yesh mosar dinar, elu notling ksubas iman, the elu notling ksubas iman, the imlav koltim shov. In other words, Rav Shimon maintains that there is a takana. There is a takana of ksubas banim different. We're not koshish for in tsuye, but only on condition that there's mosar dina. My labo hakom bifli mar sava according to Reb Shimon. Most of the yeshlam ksubas banim different. They did institute banim different on condition that there's mosar dina. Umar sava, but the Tanakama holds achas b'chayv mosar elam ksubas banim different because we're worried about in tsuya. The Gemara rejects this load. The Kuli Alma. Both Reb Shimon and the Tanakam agree that achas b'chayv, achas b'moso, yeshlam ksubas banim different, and that means that even the Tanakama agrees that there will be a takana of ksubas banim different, even in achas b'chayv, achas b'moso. The hacha here on the top of Tzadi Aleph. Bidinar mikarkoi kamiflagi. Mar sova mikarkoi in mimetaltali lo. Mar sova filu mimetaltali. The question is whether the ksubas banim dichrin is collectible even from metaltali. According to Tanakama, let me just clarify that. We're talking about the Mosar Dinar. The Mosar Dinar, to be Makayim, the Yerusha Doraisa, according to the Tanakama, has to be Mimakarkoi. But if the only Mosar Dinar is the value of Metaltalin, then we cannot fulfill the Din Yerusha Doraisa. Therefore, there's no Takana of Ksubas Banim Dichrin. Whereas Rabbi Shimon holds that, you know what? That Mosar Dinar could be either real estate or it could be metaltali. Okay, then that's where we'll stop on Erev Yom Kippur. Tafshin Pei Gimel. Okay, thank you so much for persevering with me, and we should have a Gemara Chasima Tova. And we should be written in the books of the Tzaddikim for a great year. Thank you so much.